Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 48 based on novel. So let's start. In the void, Xiao Yang holds a jade bottle in one hand and sits in the void with hesitation. The powerful soul force is still supporting the soul origin of Blackwood in the refining medicine tripod. At the moment, what makes Xiao Yang hesitate is the jade bottles in his hands. In one jade bottle is the ghost of his ancestor Xiao Xian, while in the other hand is the pure source of the soul just refined. The relationship between them is to open the caps of the two jade bottles, take out the source of the pure soul, and slowly put it into the jade bottle with residual soul, waiting for absorption and integration. This process is simple to say and easy to do, but Xiao Yang at the moment is quite dignified. After all, the relationship is not so simple. Success or failure is related to Xiao Xian's resurrection, which has to make Xiao Yang feel dignified and have to think twice. Although Ji Yu came up with this method, and Xiao Yang absolutely believed in Ji Yu, Xiao Yang had to think about it again and again. After all, when Ji Yu said these words, he didn't say so full. Ji Yu just gave Xiao Yang the greatest possibility and the most possible way to revive Xiao Xian. But there is no explanation after all. This method must be feasible. At present, he has reached the Eye of Jiegu and is about to have a result, but Xiao Yang is full of hesitation. Looking at the jade bottles in his two hands, Xiao Yang frowned tightly, sighed one after another in his heart, the look on his face changed, and the palm holding the jade bottle was loose and tight, held up and put down. Just when Xiao Yang still hesitated in his heart, a figure slowly flew into the void in the distance, which was the Bone Yu, who walked away for a moment. Ji Yu saw the look on Xiao Yang's face from a distance, and then noticed the two jade bottles in his palm and the black wood in the tripod in front of him. Ji Yu immediately understood that Xiao Yang's dilemma appeared on the jade bottle in his palm. He has nothing to say about this. Xiao Yang's hesitation is not unreasonable. After all, it is about Xiao Xian's resurrection. Ji Yu also knew that Xiao Yang didn't distrust him, but even Ji Yu didn't fully grasp that this method was feasible. The reason why he mentioned it at the beginning was just to give Xiao Yang a hope, which was the greatest possibility he could think of. Recently, Ji Yu saw Xiao Yang's tangled face, and he couldn't bear it in his heart, but he also wanted to see whether the method he thought of could become a good way to save people. Ha. Sure enough, I still have some hesitation. Ji Yu sighed, stood beside the Luo Tianding, stroked the patterns with his fingertips, and looked through the fire hole at the blackwood that was being gradually refined. Xiao Yang raised his eyes and looked at Ji Yu. He didn't speak, but showed a slightly apologetic smile. Ji Yu gently waved his hand, turned to face Xiao Yang and said, "Don't be sorry. I'm not absolutely sure about this method. I can only say it with the greatest possibility. At the same time, I hope this is the best solution. After all, before me, no one should point out a way of rebirth for him. He. When the voice fell, Guyo immediately turned around and looked up at the top of this space. There is still an endless void, and there will never be an end. When Ji Yu looked there, his eyes narrowed slightly, the essence light flashed in the depths of his pupils, his body moved and flashed away again. When he left, a voice of words slowly floated into Xiao Yang's ear. Xiao Yang, the answers to many things don't necessarily need you to find or think. Maybe it's in your hands, but you didn't try. The results are important, but isn't that process more important? Hearing this, Xiao Yang slowly took back his eyes and held the palms of two jade bottles. He couldn't help tightening them again. Looking down, Xiao Yang looked at a jade bottle in the palm of his hand. What was stored in the jade bottle was the remnant soul of Xiao Xian. After taking a deep breath, Xiao Yang slowly opened it, and the remnant soul also floated out with it. Under the careful care of Xiao Yang's soul, it floated in Xiao Yang's palm. Now, the remnant soul of Xiao Xian has been separated for 7 or 8 times. At the moment, what remains in Xiao Yang's palm is just a milky white light spot the size of a grain of rice. This milky white light spot the size of a grain of rice is the real key to Xiao Xian's resurrection. Looking at this light spot in his palm with soft eyes, Xiao Yang couldn't help thinking of the scene when he first met Xiao Xian. At that time, Xiao Xian barely survived with the help of the heavenly tomb, and the remaining strength was less than 1% of the peak period, but he stubbornly killed the 2 ancestors of the Soul family with the help of him at that time. That momentum was really very domineering. When Xiao Yang thought of seeing Xiao Xuanji for the second time, the other palm holding the jade bottle couldn't help making more efforts. His eyes were full of memories. In order for Xiao Yang to break through the shackles of the perfect soul in heaven, Xiao Yan ignited his soul and fought against the soul of Heaven Tomb. Although all this has passed for a long time, for Xiao Yang, it is like yesterday. I can see it clearly. Unconsciously, a little tears have poured into Xiao Yang's eyes. Click. A crisp sound made Xiao Yang instantly return to his mind. When his eyes looked, the jade bottle held in the other hand burst because of the continuous force of Xiao Yang's palm. The trace of pure soul origin also flew out with it. At the moment when both of them were exposed to the air, the ghost of Xiao Yan suddenly emitted a faint light, and a special suction also suddenly emerged. At the same time of the emergence of that suction, the pure soul source seemed to be dragged by something and flew away towards the remnant soul of Xiao Yan. Seeing the scene in front of him, Xiao Yang suddenly changed his face and quickly grasped the essence of the pure soul in the palm of his hand to prevent it from being swallowed and absorbed by the remnant soul of Xiao Yan. However, the tree wanted to be quiet, but the wind was not enough. When Xiao Yang grasped the source of the soul in his hand, there were several soul sources that had been thoroughly refined in Naluo Tianding, but they were all blocked by the medicine ding. If it were not blocked by the medicine ding, I would have touched the residual soul of Xiao Yan long ago. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang looked at the remnant soul of Xiao Yan again, but he saw that it was constantly releasing a special attraction and wanted to try his best to pull the origin of those souls closer. Seeing this, Xiao Yang frowned again and looked gently at the remnant soul. After a long time, he sighed and said slowly, "Ancestors, is this your choice?" The voice fell, and the special suction still didn't dissipate, and Xiao Yang finally released his palm after a fierce struggle in his heart, allowing the wisp of soul to fly out. Above the void, Xiao Yang looked at the two slowly approaching lights in front of him. His heart was full of anxiety. His eyes stared at the two light groups. As long as there was anything wrong, he would immediately separate the two. But in the end, the worry in Xiao Yang's heart never appeared after all, which made him relax a little. At the same time, he also had a glimmer of expectation for the integration between the two. Under the gaze of Xiao Yang, the pure source of the soul slowly touched with the remnant soul of Xiao Yan. The moment the two lights were combined, they released a warmer light, making the darkness in the void fade away quietly. Xiao Yang poured out all his soul power and wrapped it in the surface of the light mass to prevent being disturbed by something unexpected, but also to observe the situation more carefully. Xiao Yan's remnant soul has reached the point of extreme fragility, and it is impossible to actively integrate. At present, it is the source of the soul that is differentiating bit by bit, extracting 1% of its source of the soul and injecting it into the remnant soul. With the slow progress of this process, the residual soul of Xiao Yan has released a more beautiful milky white light than before. Although the change is very small, it cannot escape the careful observation of Xiao Yang's soul power. This change made Xiao Yang's hanging heart relax a little. Of course, it doesn't mean it's over. This is only a beginning, and a good beginning. As long as we can ensure that the source of the soul is completely absorbed by the remnant soul of Xiao Yan, we can also absorb the other source of the soul. This is what Xiao Yang wants most. After all, only in this way can Xiao Yan really have a chance to revive. When Xiao Yang distracted his soul power and enjoyed refining Haimu's soul, time has passed quickly. When Xiao Yang ensured that the remnant soul of Xiao Yan could absorb those soul sources independently, he simply put all the refined soul sources into the jade bottle together and waited for his slow integration. At this time, Jiu, who left, came back again and saw the relaxed look on Xiao Yang's face. Jiu also knew for a moment. If Xiao Yan's problem had not been solved, Xiao Yang could not show such a relaxed look. He threw a milky white light mass to Xiao Yang, and Guyo said with a smile at the corners of his mouth, "What's the matter with your ancestors?" Xiao Yang first took over the light group with a suspicious face, and then nodded lightly. Only then did he shift his attention to the light group in his hand. The light in the hand is also the source of the soul, and according to this breath, it is almost 1/5 of the source of black wood. But after feeling the above breath, Xiao Yang couldn't help but let out a light sigh and showed a touch of doubt on his face. How does this breath seem to have some familiar meaning? After thinking for a moment, Xiao Yang suddenly returned to his mind. How does the breath in the light group look like that green wood? Suddenly looking up, Xiao Yang stared at Jiu, pointed to the light in his hand, and asked with some uncertain words, "Jiu Lao, where did your soul come from?" At the moment, Xiao Yang's heart changed into an uneasy mood again. If it was really like what he noticed, wouldn't the origin of the soul in his hand be something of the head of the Shunling clan? If his people knew that he was an outsider and took something from someone else's patriarch, I don't know what would happen to him. In the face of Xiao Yang's uneasy question, Jiu smiled and said without any concern, Okay, this thing is really the greenwood, but I helped him recover his body somehow. What's the matter with giving him something as reward? Xiao Yang's face changed wildly before his voice fell. The old guy in front of him really has strength and is not afraid of anything. But anyway, you took out the source of people's soul, and now you throw him a half-emperor boy. If people really come to the door, is this thing strange bone you or Xiao Yang? For Xiao Yang's worried look, Jiu Yudu couldn't help laughing. In Xiao Yang's complaining eyes, he gently waved and raised his hand to surrender, and then smiled and said, "Why, I've been blamed like this by this boy, and your client doesn't come out and say a word or two. I'd like to know if you really bite the hand that feeds you for helping you so much." When the voice came out, Xiao Yang immediately raised his eyebrows and looked along the bone-quiet eyes. At the end, a human figure stood in the void like a dead tree without moving at all. It was not until Guyo's words came out that his heart emitted a dazzling blue light, and then a strong breath of life swept away. His body, which had been standing in the void, was also slowly relaxed, his eyes opened gently, and full of vitality. After the dazzling green light flashed, at a glance, the original Blackwood had disappeared. At the moment, the strange patterns on the whole body of the old man had already disappeared. A pair of emerald green eyes showed wisdom and brilliance. When he woke up, his body suddenly flashed and appeared in front of Guyo. He hugged his fists and immediately made a younger salute to Guyo. "Young Aroki, I've seen the fire spirit elder." Xiao Yang didn't understand until he heard these words. No wonder Guyo took away the source of people's soul and looked indifferent. It turned out that Qingmu already knew his identity. Jiu smiled when he heard the speech, but then he snorted coldly and said, "You really woke up and dared to pretend in front of me. You're not afraid that I'll burn your ginseng root?" Jiu uttered a word. Qingmu hurriedly pressed his buried head deeper, and hurriedly said, "Please don't blame the elder, but the younger generation hasn't recovered at that time and has been taken away from the source of the soul. Blackwood has just been stripped out of the body. In order to purify the residual smell of Blackwood in Shinling root, the younger generation hasn't appeared yet." Why, it's my fault to say so." Jiu's sentence made Qingmu face frightened and quickly denied it. "The bone in front of you can't be provoked by the monkeys of today's Shinling clan. Not to mention his strength, it's enough to sweep away their Shinling clan just because he is the body of fire spirit. The boy said that I have strengthened your origin. It's my fault. Do you agree?" Jiu's words were again exported, and Qingmu's eyes coagulated with them. He quickly turned his eyes to Xiao Yang, with a smile on his face and said with a smile, "It's a great kindness for the younger generation to help the younger generation regain their noumenon. A little soul origin is nothing. It's a big deal to practice again slowly. Take it, little friend Yang Xiao, ha ha." Although he said it easily, Xiao Yang also saw Qingmu sweating and his soul was drawn. At the moment, he was very weak and said something to practice slowly, which was ridiculous. The origin of the soul is the lifeblood of life. Can it be easily obtained by cultivation? I'm afraid Qingmu can't recover this fifth of the origin for hundreds or even thousands of years. Looking at his appearance again, it was obviously impossible to take it back. In that case, Xiao Yang had to put it away with an apologetic face after taking a hard look at Guyo. In the dark world, time passes quietly at the fingertips. In the twinkling of an eye, there is little left of the refined soul of Blackwood. At this time, another light mass appeared in the medicine tripod. It was the sealed fighting spirit of Blackwood in the light group. The appearance of this light group also brought Xiao Yang an unexpected joy. As long as you can refine and absorb all the fighting chi in the light group, all the fighting chi of a 9-star and a half-emperor is not a small training resource. Of course, as before, if you want to rest assured to absorb these fighting spirits, you naturally have to go through several times of repeated refining. Otherwise, Xiao Yang is really worried. The same repeated steps were repeated in the tripod in front of Xiao Yang. After the refining and purification of different fire, there was a fighting spirit with the thickness of the arm, but there was only a thin rope with the thickness of the thumb. Although the appearance is not as good as before, the purity and content of fighting spirit are not much different from the original. Of course, while refining, it is impossible not to consume. The power of different fire is absolute. Although the huge amount of these fighting spirit is equivalent to a fighting spirit ocean, under the continuous refining of different fire, it has also changed from a fighting spirit ocean to a fighting spirit lake. The so-called want to get, you have to lose first. What happened in the tripod at the moment is this scene. However, it doesn't matter to Xiao Yang. Anyway, these fighting spirits are not from his cultivation. As long as he can have a positive proportion of strength and how much he consumes, he doesn't care. As for Guyo, after playing with Qingmu, he moved his body again and explored the depths of this space. Qingmu looked at Guyo's leaving body and breathed a little easily in his mouth. The cold sweat on his forehead also gushed out like a spring in an instant. Facing Guyo, he could always feel a kind of threat. This may be the posture of the strong, or it may be because Guyo itself is different fire. In the face of different fires, the ancient races born for heaven and earth, are also difficult to compare with them. Jiyuyu's departure gave Qingmu enough time to recover. Otherwise, he really didn't dare to look as relaxed and indifferent as Xiao Yang. Therefore, in this space at the moment, except for a wandering Jiyu, Xiao Yang and Qingmu in the field have entered a state of concentrated cultivation. I don't know how long later, the quiet atmosphere in the field was broken by a sudden vigorous wind. Qingmu, who was slowly recovering in the state of cultivation, was almost blown down by an oncoming vigorous wind. However, at least Aoki is also a strength faction. Although he is at a low point at the moment, this vigorous wind can't hurt him. The figure sitting in the void suddenly flashed, and it had retreated to 100 feet away, staring at the center of the storm. With his keen perception, he knew instantly that the source of the vigorous wind was there. But when Qingmu saw it, he was slightly surprised by the scene in front of him. The central source of the vigorous wind was Xiao Yang. At the moment, Xiao Yang's breath has reached the peak of the late 3-star half-emperor. He can really break through the 3-star half-emperor and enter the 4-star. For this, the terrible gang wind around Xiao Yang is the best proof. Seeing Xiao Yang seem to break through, Qingmu's face changed slightly, and his eyes hurried to the medicine tripod in front of him. At the moment, the medicine tripod was empty, the raging fire had already dispersed, and the two light groups also completely disappeared. Seeing this scene, Aoki instantly understood that no wonder Xiao Yang has reached the edge of breakthrough at the moment. It seems that he has absorbed all those fighting spirit. But just like this, Aoki not only didn't feel happy about it, but frowned tightly. His eyes stared at Xiao Yang, and there was a strange flash in his eyes. A moment later, when the storm around Xiao Yang was getting stronger and stronger, the old figure of Jiyu came quickly in the void in the distance. Although thousands of miles apart, Jiyu had already stared at Xiao Yang in the middle of the storm. Aware of the increasingly fierce storm around him, the Bonyu at the moment was also worried, but even so, there was still a trace of expectation in his heart. Close to the front, Guyo and Qingmu stood side by side, looking at Xiao Yang in the field. When Qingmu saw Guyo coming back, he naturally didn't dare to be careless. He quickly bowed his hands to Guyo, but at this time, Guyo didn't want to play with it again. He just waved his hands indiscriminately and ignored it. "This boy, why are you in such a hurry? He has been promoted 4 stars a year. Your boy is going to die." Feeling the more and more powerful breath in Xiao Yang's body, Jiyu also frowned, and there was a sound of drinking and scolding in his mouth. But when the words in Jiyuku fell into Qingmu's ears, the look on Qingmu's face became more intense in an instant. He had just heard from the man beside him that Xiao Yang had risen 4 stars in a year. If someone else said this, maybe he would be all joking, but if the Bonyu in front of him said it, he couldn't think of the word joking. Within a year, even rising to 4 stars is still the rank of half-emperor. Isn't this cultivation speed going against the sky? The road of cultivation is so difficult that Aoki doesn't know. Although his strength is far better than Xiao Yang, he also clearly knows how difficult it is for Bandi to be promoted. At the half-emperor level, the cultivation of each star needs to be supported by a terrible fighting spirit dozens of times stronger than the fighting saint. If you want to advance, whether it's the fighting spirit you need or the precipitation of your own cultivation, it's more terrible. Generally speaking, the cultivation of the semi-imperial strong has rarely relied only on the energy of heaven and earth, because all the semi-imperial strong know that it is very slow to enhance their strength only by their own absorption of the energy of heaven and earth, and if they want to make a breakthrough, it needs to be at the cost of years. Of course, if the cultivation method is enough against the sky, it should be counted separately. After all, the power of Kung Fu can make practitioners absorb the energy of heaven and earth more quickly. High-level Kung Fu is equally effective even for strong people such as Semi-Emperor. The reason why Xiao Yang was able to break through so quickly was that when he broke through, he was limited by the rules of heaven and earth in the fighting mainland, and the potential of different fire had not been fully displayed. 2. Because of the Tiankyu demon flower. Tiankyu demon flower has been bred through heaven and earth for thousands of years. It was originally a good cultivation resource. Xiao Yang swallowed it and refined it. Only then did it reach the middle of the 3-star semi-emperor. But with the continuous improvement of Xiao Yang's strength, he has never completely stabilized it for a long time. Today, if Xiao Yang breaks through again, I'm afraid it will take a longer time to make up for his gap in cultivation these days. Therefore, at present, the only thing Guyo expects is that Xiao Yang can rein in on the precipice and stop in time. Otherwise, the result may be unacceptable to Xiao Yang. When Jiu and Aoki are worried about Xiao Yang outside the court, Xiao Yang, who is in the center of the storm, is also helpless and can only try his best to suppress the surging fighting spirit in his body. At the moment, Xiao Yang's mood can only be expressed in one sentence. Greedy snake swallows elephant. In order to absorb the fighting spirit of refining Blackwood as soon as possible, Xiao Yang swallowed one of them without much consideration. Sure enough, all the fighting spirit of a 9-star-and-a-half emperor broke out in Xiao Yang's body, just like a runaway wild horse, galloping freely. The terrible fighting spirit didn't burst Xiao Yang's body in an instant, which was a good result. Under Xiao Yang's control, the initial fighting spirit was still under Xiao Yang's control. Although it was hard, the refining speed was much faster. After the refining of different fire and the refining of the burning formula, more pure fighting spirit poured into the cyclone space along the skill route of the burning formula. Xiao Yang's breath was gradually recovered in the slow refining process. Even though the process was a little long, the speed was still faster than that in the medicine tripod. Moreover, fighting qi goes directly into the practice route of burning dew after being refined by different fire. In this way, the refined fighting qi is more pure and solid, and can be better used by Xiao Yang. Otherwise, if it was absorbed after refining, it would cause more trouble for Xiao Yang. He had to run the fighting qi several times along the route of burning dew, just to integrate with the fighting qi in his body. Xiao Yang's idea is certainly good. It is indeed a lot faster and easier, but the current result seems to put Xiao Yang into greater trouble. He didn't expect that after some refining, the fighting spirit condensed was so huge that Xiao Yang's cyclone space could not be fully collected. Therefore, the situation brought about is the breakthrough that ordinary strong people are looking forward to. But Xiao Yang knows better than anyone that his situation at the moment is not suitable for breakthrough. He knows the problems that Guyo can think of in his heart. If you break through at this time, I'm afraid your strength can't be improved for a long time. This is not a good thing for Xiao Yang, who urgently needs strength. After all, the ghost break door will not give him extra time to practice. With the skills of those ghosts, I'm afraid their own affairs in the wild city have already been passed into their ears. The next meeting between Xiao Yang and them will not be too far away. At this moment, in the center of the storm, Xiao Yang has been supported by the huge fighting spirit in his body. His whole body has increased by more than 3 circles in this short moment. But even so, Xiao Yang's body continues to grow. At a glance, Xiao Yang at this time is like a time bomb. As long as the fighting spirit in his body reaches a peak, it will explode with a bang. In fact, Xiao Yang at this time is also in such a state. In the internal cyclone, a surge of fighting spirit ran through all corners of Xiao Yang's body, turning Xiao Yang into a fat man alive. At this moment, I'm afraid that cutting a blood hole everywhere on Xiao Yang will spew out a surge of fighting spirit. For a moment, Xiao Yang's body could no longer support it. Ferocious blood mouths spread all over Xiao Yang's body. The blood was mixed with turbulent fighting spirit and shot out like a fountain. But even so, Xiao Yang's situation is still not getting better. It seems that Xiao Yang can only try to break through. Ah! Suddenly, Xiao Yang suddenly gave a roar like a dragon roar from his mouth. A strong fighting light column also shot out with it and disappeared into the void above Xiao Yang's head. After this roar, Xiao Yang's body suddenly emitted a burst of dazzling golden light. In a short instant, a golden giant appeared in the center of the storm. And those surging fighting spirits seemed to have a vent point suddenly, and suddenly spread, and Xiao Yang finally had a chance to breathe again. With this time, Xiao Yang quickly mobilized the strange fire in his body and prepared to clean up the mess. At the same time, he also hoped that the accident would end here. It's just a pity that Xiao Yang underestimates the strong number of fighting spirit. Although he has the temporary support of King Kong Glass Body, those fierce fighting spirit quickly climbed up in just a moment, but the good news is that Xiao Yang can barely suppress it. Feeling the fierce fighting spirit still surging in his body, Xiao Yang finally relaxed a little. When his spirit was refreshed, Xiao Yang slowly smiled at the corners of his mouth and said softly, "Ha ha. Next, you should go back honestly." The voice fell, and the strange fire in Xiao Yang's body rose, quickly spread to the internal organs of Xiao Yang, and wrapped all the fighting qi. Under the suppression of different fire, The fighting spirit was gradually compressed into thumb-sized beads, and then wrapped by different fire and recovered into the cyclone. After experiencing the previous pain, Xiao Yang at the moment is more careful, trying to condense every wisp of fighting spirit as much as possible, and then he will be carefully included in the cyclone. And it was not until this time that Xiao Yang's face was able to turn around. As those fighting qi returned to the cyclone again, Xiao Yang slowly entered the state of cultivation, and the burning formula in his body also ran with it. At this time, Xiao Yang needs to condense and refine the scattered fighting spirit again. At the same time, it is also a refinement of his own fighting spirit. No matter from which aspect, the benefits to Xiao Yang are self-evident. In the cyclone, the gorgeous strange fire is guarding in front of the cyclone space, refining each wisp of fighting spirit after refining. After the extreme refinement of different fire, each wisp of pure fighting spirit of thumb turned into a hair-like thin line, which was immediately included in the cyclone space. When Xiao Yang condensed all the fighting spirit again, the originally full fighting spirit in the cyclone space is now only half of the space, which is filled with fighting spirit like lake water. As for the remaining part, this is the benefit brought by Xiao Yang's refining and fighting spirit this time. In the cyclone space at the moment, although it seems that the fighting spirit is not as full as before, it is more condensed. When used, it will not be less than before. On the contrary, the condensed effect will make Xiao Yang's fighting spirit more powerful, and the remaining part of the space is the performance of Xiao Yang's strength improvement. From now on, although Xiao Yang has never set foot in the 4-star and half Emperor, he has reached the peak level of the late 3-star and half Emperor. Even if he is one step away from the 4-star and half Emperor, when the water comes, Xiao Yang can officially break through. On the contrary, there will be no gap in Xiao Yang's strength. Drink. On the void, the terrible vigorous wind dispersed, but the golden giant suddenly stood up and roared toward the void above his head. Like a rainbow. After a long roar, the golden giant still seemed to have more meaning. His huge body was suddenly shocked, his fists were suddenly clenched, and then a fierce roar was sent out in his mouth. The giant fist was suddenly waved, sweeping across the void with the terrible vigorous wind tearing the void. Boom. Although it did not hurt the real object, the invisible void was forced out of a pressure ring like a gun bore, and the space in it only exploded when the pressure reached the peak. This kind of prestige, with one punch, is enough to compare with the Tianjie fighting skill performed by a 1.5-star emperor. Hehe, it seems that this boy is also a little self-conscious. He's not as arrogant as usual. Seeing Xiao Yang, Jiuyu also smiled and moved forward, which was flying towards Xiao Yang, and after that, Qingmu hurried to keep up. Boom. It was another punch. This time, the giant transformed by Xiao Yang held his hands together, and a fierce hammer came out from top to bottom, making the void in front of him emit bursts of terrible sonic booms. When the blow fell, the void suddenly exploded, and the fierce storm swept over in an instant and impacted on the oncoming Bonyu. Jiuyu didn't care about it. He waved at will and scattered Xiao Yang's terrible blow. Seeing this, Xiao Yang had to curl his mouth in his heart and face Jiuyu. No matter how hard he tried to bombard, it was in vain. Smelly boy, you're really brave. You can swallow all the fighting spirit of the 9-star and half Emperor. If you hadn't been protected by different fire, you'd have consumed a lot in refining before. See how you live today. Playing is playing, but Jiuyu still has a lot of words to scold. Xiao Yang's behavior today is really too much. Once he is careless, it's really fatal. In this regard, Xiao Yang can only smile. He doesn't understand that he has always been cautious. Why did he make a fool to do such a moth to the fire today? I shrugged helplessly. Anyway, the matter about Blackwood can come to an end. Now I have recovered my peak, and it's time to leave here. A thought flashed in his heart. Xiao Yang looked up at the endless void and frowned slightly. There was no boundary here. He didn't know where the way out was. Looking like this, it seemed impossible to go out. Seeing this scene of Xiao Yang, Jiuyu naturally knew the questions in Xiao Yang's heart, but he just smiled and didn't say it clearly. Instead, he turned to look at the green wood behind him and said with a smile, "This space should be under your control." The words in Guyo's mouth fell. Xiao Yang also raised his eyebrows and turned his eyes to Qingmu. He just heard the meaning of Guyo's words. This space seems to have some special connection with Qingmu. Hearing the words, Qingmu looked a little frozen, and his eyebrows wrinkled. After thinking for a moment, he raised his eyes to Guyo and Xiao Yang, and then nodded slowly. Then, Aoki sighed with a bitter look on his face. What you said is right. The Shunling space is controlled by the clan leader of the Shunling family. Unfortunately, Haimu was also the youngest clan leader of our family. When the voice fell, Qingmu ignored the surprised look on Xiao Yang's face, sighed low and continued. This spiritual space has the soul mark of Blackwood, but I can't find it with my ability, so. At this point, needless to say, Guyo also knows the meaning of Qingmu's words, but he just wants to help him find out where the soul mark is. After all, at the moment, Aoki's soul is damaged. The only one who can find the soul mark is Guyo. Lightly skimmed his lips, Guyo was helpless. This guy obviously wanted to help him regain control of the spirit space, and he had to say these superfluous nonsense. Noticing the unhappy look on Jiyuyu's face, Aoki smiled awkwardly, looked at Xiao Yang and stopped talking. Xiao Yang was also amused by the look of the two people in the field, and Guyo ignored it. His mind moved, and the majestic soul power spread rapidly. After some exploration, a strange smell was discovered by him. The eyes narrowed slightly, the bone was quiet, the heart read a move, and the soul power immediately swarmed up to quickly surround the breath. At the same time, the bone spirit cold fire rose again, and the breath was completely erased in just a few breaths. When the breath was erased, a strange stone platform also appeared under the gaze of Guyo's soul power. Seeing this, Guyo's mouth immediately aroused a smile. When his heart moved, he brought it back quickly. Looking at the stone platform in front of him, Qingmu took a deep breath, and then looked at Guyo. In Xiao Yang's strange eyes, he saluted Guyo again. Younger generation Qingmu, on behalf of the Shenling clan, thank you for your kindness. If you can come to our clan in the future, I will go through fire and water for you. Looking at the green wood in front of him, Xiao Yang frowned slightly and looked at the strange stone platform. His heart was full of questions. It was just a stone platform. Could it really move an ancient family? When Jiyuyu saw this, he smiled, nodded, was satisfied, and smiled. Ha ha, it's not necessary to go through fire and water. After all, I'm born with different fire. However, if the boy is in trouble in the future, I hope you can remember what you said today. At least, help the boy within your ability. Of course, if you help him, I think you won't get a bad return. You'll understand in the future, ha ha. I can only say that what you do today will reward you with a towering giant tree for your Shenling family in the future. Listening to the words of affirmation in Jiyuyu's mouth, Qingmu raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiao Yang with a strange flash. What's so special about Xiao Yang's body that he can make such a terrible spirit of fire boast? At this moment, Xiao Yang and Qingmu are suspicious of each other. The different strong men of the two times are full of curiosity about each other's future. I have to say that this is really a rare sight in the world. Xiao Yang and Qingmu looked at each other. They all saw the color of sigh in each other's eyes. Then they looked at each other and smiled. Qingmu returned to his mind and set his eyes on the strange stone platform in front of him again. At the moment, the soul mark of Haimu on the stone platform has been erased by Guyo, and Qingmu can easily leave the soul mark, and the spirit space will return to the hands of the head of the spirit clan again. When Aoki left his unique soul mark on the stone platform, a strange energy wave quickly spread around the stone platform. At the moment of energy fluctuation and diffusion, the void around the stone platform seemed to be renovated at this moment and turned into a green color. Then, the void around Xiao Yang turned into a green color. The whole space was completely changed at this moment. The endless void gradually fades away and takes on a new look. It is a bright world full of vitality. Xiao Yang and Jiyu also looked surprised and constantly scanned the rapidly changing world around them. Even they saw this magical scene for the first time. Aoki also stared at the familiar world in front of him. He recalled the Shenling family in the past. At the moment, his heart is also surging. After a long time, Qingmu slowly took back his eyes, looked at Xiao Yang and Guyo, smiled and said, "The endless void you saw before is Haimu's masterpiece, and now the world in front of you is the original face of the spirit space." Hearing Qingmu's explanation, Xiao Yang understood, and Guyo also smiled and nodded. Obviously, he had expected Qingmu's explanation. Taking a deep breath, Aoki faced Xiao Yang and suddenly laughed and said, "Welcome two distinguished guests to our family Shenling space." A heroic laugh fell, but there were green logs in the space around the three people out of thin air. Then, the cross-section of the logs quickly gathered at the feet of the three people and turned into a special long step. At the end of the long step is a magnificent hall formed by ginseng spirit tree. The original huge trunk part was forcibly buckled out by the Shenling family. The huge hall can even hold tens of thousands of people, which is the algorithm to remove some other buildings. It is also conceivable how magnificent this towering ancient tree is in its original appearance. Xiao Yang and Ji Yu looked at the magnificent hall from a distance. They were shocked by the great works of the Shenling family. At this moment, even the Bone Yu, who has always been arrogant, can't help showing a deep shock color on his face at this moment. Hihi, you too. This hall of Shenling was transformed by an ancient ancestor of our family. It was left for our family by his own mastery of heaven before the deadline. Seeing the look on Xiao Yang's face, Aoki's heart can't help feeling proud of it. It seems that he deeply admires the divine power of his ancestor, even the spirit of different fire in front of him. When Xiao Yang heard the words in Aoki's mouth, they set off a storm in their heart. Such a magnificent hall was transformed by the ancestors of the Shenling family. Xiao Yang was impressed by this righteous act alone. While the three were talking, at a glance, all the darkness in this space had been completely removed. At the moment, this ginseng spirit space can really be called ginseng spirit space. Well, after talking so much, I think it's time to leave. Listening to the endless words in Aoki's mouth, Guyo also understood that he just wanted to take the opportunity to have a good relationship with him and Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang naturally knows this, but as a younger generation, he can't say it clearly. In that case, it's up to Ji Yu. Hearing Ji Yu's impatient words, Aoki was stunned. Then he smiled a little embarrassed. He knew he couldn't keep them, so he had to stop talking nonsense and said with a smile, "Hey, yes, you are really tired these days. I'll open the exit of Shenling space and send you away." When the voice fell, Qingmu's hands also lifted up. During the change of Yin-Ju, a thought came out, and then the space above the three people's heads slowly cracked a space crack. Haha, I'm sorry to make you laugh. Because the spirit participation space has just been restored, many places are not stable enough, so we can only open the channel in this way first. Sorry. Some embarrassed smiled. Aoki was helpless. Haimu didn't destroy the space channel during the control period, otherwise he and Luo wouldn't be able to enter the spirit participation space. Now it's his best way to tear the void. Xiao Yang shrugged helplessly when he saw this. Had he known so, should Ji Yu open the channel when solving Haimu at that time? Ji Yu was also slightly dissatisfied and glanced at the green wood. Then he moved and disappeared into Xiao Yang's body as a white light. At the same time, a cold voice came out. Aoki boy, I hope you can remember what you said in this spiritual space today after you go out. In addition, don't tell anyone about my existence, otherwise. At the end of the speech, Guyo didn't say anything cruel, but Qingmu felt a terrible pressure with a very cold breath at that moment. Although it was only a moment, it still made the green wood cold all over. He knew that Guyo's words were by no means playful. Therefore, when the words fell, he nodded quickly and dared not neglect them. Seeing this, Xiao Yang also reluctantly said sorry to Aoki, then shook his head and flew into the space crack. After that, Aoki hurriedly followed after shaking for a moment. Compared with this spiritual space, the outside world at the moment has long been on full alert. 32 Lingwei and Luo Laro are standing in the void and ready for a shocking war. Above the sky, 32 spirit guards occupy one side, sit in the void, control part of the lower array, and pour all their source chi into the array. Looking from a distance, the pillars of source gas and light connect with each other in a distant distance, forming a large array on the void, which covers the mountains and forests thousands of miles below. At the eye of the array, Luo Larochin went to the array, controlled the eye of the array, combined all the forces of the large array, condensed the source gas in the palm, and was ready to bombard the space crack on the Earth at any time. Just now, when Luo Laro came to this void and wanted to strengthen the array again, there was a sudden change in the void below the array. In the invisible void, a space crack suddenly opened. Although there was no human shadow, Luo Laro could immediately think of the green wood and black wood in the space under the Earth at the moment. No matter who opened the space crack, in short, Haimu is bound to appear again. In that case, he must be ready for war before Haimu appears. Otherwise, it will be a painful blow for both Yu Qingmu and Shenling. Once Haimu escapes from the outside world, when he returns again, he must return strongly. At that time, I'm afraid even Luo Laro and the whole Shenling family can't help him. At that time, I'm afraid it will be the day of the destruction of the Shenling family. At the moment, Luo Laro is also dignified. He deeply knows what strength Haimu has. Even if it is not as good as that year, it cannot be underestimated. What's more, the space under the Earth is his nest. At this time, I'm afraid he has already recovered a lot of strength with the help of Shenling family. However, just when Luo Laro and others were ready to fight, a hearty laugh came from the crack in the space. Ha ha! Laro Luo, even if you are welcome, You don't have to use such a big show. This video will end here.